It took you a number of years from writing Shadow of the Hidden to finishing it, I believe, in mid 2022, and now finally having it out. So let's talk about that 2-year journey to publication.
Well, yeah. Um, it's a funny one, really, because like I said, it was my first novel. I was very keen to find a good home, which I did. Um, I shopped it to a few places, and it got shortlisted by a few places, but ultimately passed on. And I think maybe part of that was the setting being quite unconventional and like people not really knowing who it's maybe for. You know what I mean? Like, are people going to want to read this when it's in such unfamiliar setting with unfamiliar folklore, unfamiliar kind of rules of engagement, as it were? So I think that possibly led to it being not taken a chance on, as it were. But then I gave it to British Gate Press, who originally took it, and they quite quickly came back and said that they were very keen. But they had already signed up an absolute avalanche of books for the back end of 2023, and they didn't want it to kind of disappear into an overburdened release schedule. So they said, we're going to do spring 2024. And it was originally going to be coming out in April, actually, towards the end of April. And then I said to them, look, I'm going to go to AuthorCon. Do you reckon we could move it forward a month so I can take copies there and do like a soft launch type thing? And they were like, yes, we can. So that's what we did. Yeah.
And what has your experience working with the press been like? I mean, I understand too that there was quite an editorial process with, I've never said her name out loud. Is it Elle Turpitt?
Elle Turpitt, yeah. Oh my God. I'm so glad you mentioned that because it's really funny, actually. When my previous book, the novella Below, I worked with Kenneth W. Kane, who, as you know, is a legendary editor. And it's really interesting that, like, the experience I had with both these editors was completely fantastic and completely different. So, for example, when working with Kenneth Kane, one of the things that he, like, the bee in his bonnet, as it were, is like POV. And, like, I mean, having worked with him on that one book, like, I am just so much more aware of being on top of POV and making sure that, my point of view character is always only seeing what they can see and never seeing something they shouldn't be able to. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm so much more hyper aware of that ever since going through our editing process of Below. And that was a massive positive for me. Working with Elle Turpitt was really different. And one thing that I really loved that she did for this book, and I believe she does for all books, is she gave me the line edit with suggestions, and a lot of. She's very, very hot on grammar, very hot on punctuation. I'm pretty good on grammar. My punctuation could be better, so that was useful. But she also supplies like a reader report, which breaks the book down into blocks of 5 chapters, and like so she'll like go through chapter 1 to 5, 6 to 10 for plot, and then for character development, and then for world building, and then for grammar and punctuation. And so you've got like this general, you've got like the line edit where it's like, I think you need to explain this particular thing happening here, or why is this person saying this, or who is saying this, or whatever, on a very kind of micro level. But then on this macro level as well, you've got like, okay, this midsection of the book from chapter like 11 to 15, it feels like the pace steps up a little bit too much. And I think you need to slow it down to make it more sort of in line with the rest of the book. And this was just so invaluable, just stuff that I wasn't able necessarily to look at when you're so close to the book you've been working on for such a long time. Just having someone to say like, like pacing is good here, runs away, just, roll it back a little bit. Incredibly useful.
And so when you had a situation where you're being asked to roll back the pacing, what kind of things were you putting in to ensure that you're putting things in that are contributing to the story rather than
Sure.
just being
Yeah.
filler that could essentially be removed?
It's a really good point. Yeah, I'm probably doing her a bit of a disservice here, actually, because what she would do is she would say, I think the reason the pace here has gone away from itself is because we don't have as much character reaction, for example. Like we're seeing the events, but we're not seeing how it's impacting the characters in a consistent way with how you have in the rest of the book. And so that kind of enabled me to, like you say, uh, sort of rein in that pace a little bit, so it was more consistent, but without it just being filler, without it just being fat.
And I wonder too, how many instances were there where there was a suggestion or a note where you disagreed with it, and kind of what did those conversations look like? Because I think, as a writer, it's important to know what notes to take on and then what to
Yeah,
say, actually, this was a deliberate choice, or this is the aesthetic or the effect that I'm going for.
yeah, there were some bits where, especially, I think that was more, mainly in the line edit, but also in the reader report, there were some bits where I disagreed, and I wrote notes back, and my notes were generally accepted. But I think I made the decision to fight back on the things that I felt were really important, and then some of the other things I kind of was able to look at and go like, yeah, okay, I can see this perspective. So it felt very much like a collaborative process, which I really, really enjoyed. And I definitely feel it brought the best out of the book. Definitely.
Yeah, and it's so great that you've had two really positive and two contrasting, in many ways, editorial experiences.
Yeah,
So,
completely different, but both totally invaluable, I would say.
and I think too, when we kind of go away from an edit and then we have things that we can apply to future works, I mean,
Absolutely.
that
Yeah,
that is when it's really
that's
gold. When
gold,
you
isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're almost writing something or looking through a draft and you hear Max Booth, his voice in your head, and he's telling you something. And it's not just a dick joke, it's actually a very good editorial line. And then, you can go forward and you can do that. A lot of
Yeah,
the notes, bizarrely, that have really helped out. And I say bizarrely because you wouldn't, his job isn't primarily being an editor, is actually, my film manager, Ryan Lewis. He is so sharp with his observations. So even though he does stuff on the film side, I send him every single, book length story that I write because he will just
it's
spot
going to come back
things.
with
Or,
something. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And every
Hmm.
time he makes things better.
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, it seems like a good editor can like they can quickly determine what your story is, and they it's like they know more about it than you do, and you wrote the thing. And to me, that when you can be that in tune with fiction, that that's like an art form, you know. When you have a good, especially a good line editor that actually does content and the copy editing and stuff like that. Uh, I remember the first time I got edited, like by a really, really good editor, and it was eye opening, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot, but I've been edited by a bad editor. I had a story basically accepted with no edits, and so uh, there was very, very, very few notes that it's just like I was like, hey, yeah, accept changes, you know, and uh, and then later, had to go back and cringe. It's like, oh wow. So I've had both experiences, but having a good editor, to me, it's just uncanny how they know more about it than you do, and you're like, God damn, how did I missed that? I can't believe it.
yeah,
But you learn from it.
absolutely. Going back to what you're saying as well about working with Bridges Gate more generally, I think the thing that I really love about working with them is that um, they're just always available for contact. And this is one of the things that I've a lot of my writer friends have sort of talked about recently. With um, one of the biggest problems with working in small press is that a lot of the time, you won't hear back from messages, emails, whatever, for sometimes months at a time, and you'll think like, are they ghosting me? Are they out of business? What's going on here? And with Bridgesgate, it's just been so good that I can just drop them. I can send them an email, like something more formal, or I can send them a message on private message on Twitter, and we're always within a few days they'll come back to me with an update, or if they are busy, they'll say, "Oh, look, we're busy, but we'll get back to you, within 2 days, whatever." And it's normally quicker than the timeline that they originally suggested. So, I mean, that in terms of peace of mind is for me invaluable.
Yeah, and of course they don't take all the rights either, because as you say, you're putting out the audiobook independently, and I do think like looking over that contract and just making sure that it seems fair for you, if
Yeah,
possible, getting an independent party, getting a lawyer, getting an agent, getting someone who's been there before to look over it. Just as there's a lot of good presses out there, but unfortunately, we've all heard stories and probably know people firsthand where that hasn't always been the case. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
but I mean, you said before that in terms of like marketing, I know that you're going kind of all out with this one. And so one of the things I believe that you're doing is a Bookbub promotion.
Yeah, I did the new releases for less Bookbub. So I know that like the kind of crowning glory of Bookbub promotions is the featured deal thing, which is quite expensive. But I have quite a few writer friends who've managed to have one of these and have made a real success of it. Selling thousands of copies of their book, albeit at 99 cents or whatever. So because Bridgesgate decided to put Shadow of the Hidden, and they put all of their books generally on a pre-order deal of like 99 cents, just to try and get it charting before release, kind of thing. I did this new releases for less thing with Bookbub. I don't know as yet what the sales numbers were, but I did get a little Amazon bestseller sticker for a couple of days, so that's encouraging. So it will. I mean, after 3 months of sales, I will find out what the numbers really were, and we'll see if it paid off there or not. But I think with all these things, like you have to kind of, if you can, obviously, if you can afford it, if you have the money sitting around, you have to try these things out and see how it works. And in this case, I decided that I could afford to give that a go and see how it turned out. And so we will see how it turned out in due course.
And in terms of looking at those metrics, would that be because Bridget's Gate are, accounting to you and are giving you those royalty statements, or is there actually anything within BookBub where you can track the referrals?
Well, BookBub give you clicks, but the clicks don't necessarily translate to
Yeah.
sales. That's a thing. So yeah, it's very up in the air in that sense. Also, they don't chart the ones. For example, like if I click on a BookBub, it normally goes to Amazon US or Spain, but my Kindle
Mm.
account is attached to UK, so that would not count as a click for that sale. So yeah. So I mean, yeah, Bridgesgate are another thing about them actually that's really good is that they're so hot on giving you royalty statements with spreadsheets breaking down the sales from that month. Those 3 months from from Amazon, from B&N, from wherever it may be. So yeah, I will find out the kind of hard facts about that after 3 months beyond launch, basically.
Yeah, and very tangentially related to marketing, I've noticed a number of people classify this one as action horror, or certainly having an action horror slant. But I mean, when I was reading it, I would say that rather than action horror, it's more adventure horror.
That's what I
So,
went for. Like that's actually the
yeah.
subtitle of the book, a novel of adventure horror. And that's a marketing thing from an Amazon ads course I did this last year, where they said if you can add subtitles with the name of the subgenre you're working in, apparently it means that when you promote with Amazon ads, it makes it easier to find people who like that kind of jam.
And so, is that literally in the book? Does it say this is an adventure horror novel within the book, like as a literal
It says it
subtitle,
basically
or is
on
that?
the title. It's just on the listings on the internet, basically. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, because like you do see some books that they literally on the cover say
It says a
a
horror novel.
novel. Yeah, a horror novel, a cosmic horror novel, and I understand why people do it, but there's something that for me personally it sits a little bit uneasy. I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah,
want
I think
it.
it's a bit weird.
Yeah, yeah. You know, like we didn't see that like back in the day, Moby Dick story about a fucking whale, mate, or
I
something
might one
like
day do
that.
one that says like a novel made of paper,
Yeah, yeah.
but not
Well,
for the ebook. Obviously, that'd be silly.
I mean, they could. It would be factually incorrect, but anyway, moving
Anyway,
moving away from that, as this is a novel that involves a curse, I wonder what is the nearest you have experienced to having a curse placed on you? You can interpret that as widely as you like.
okay. Well, some people might know this, some people might not know this, but I'm a Man City fan, which is a football team or soccer, as Americans would know it. And the only season where I was living in the UK and earning like the kind of money where I could actually go regularly to games was the season where we had a former England footballer called Stuart Pearce as our manager. And it was one of the most turgid and awful seasons of football that any team has played in the history of mankind. And I went to like the most games that I've been to in my whole life during that season, where no goals were scored, no fun was had. It was like sort of, I don't know, it's like going to like one of the really miserable churches every week. So that was definitely a curse in my life. It felt like a curse.
Yeah,
You think it was bad for you? Imagine how they felt.
True story.
yeah,
What
but I
about you guys? Any
suppose, I
curses in your
mean,
lives?
well, hang on. Let's continue with Man City for a moment because I mean, I feel that like in terms of being a Man City fan, I mean, you were probably like kind of born in the wrong time because if you'd have been born like a decade or two later, then you know your childhood and seeing Man
Would have
City,
just been like
it,
glory. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But you know, unfortunately, when we were growing up, that they were not a great
Mostly
team.
crap. Yeah,
Let's be
mostly
honest.
crap. Yeah.
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 Um,
But I think that
but
was
you
like character building.
was it? I mean,
It
that's what every
gave me
kind
a
of
certain
90s.
resilience.
Yeah, it's what every 90s dad says about any sort of trauma, but yeah, I'm
Exactly,
not sure
exactly.
if it's actually grounded in reality. Oh, but you were asking us if we'd had
Yeah.
any
Any curses in
sort
your
of
lives, guys?
curses. What about you, Bob? Yeah, what about you, Bob?
Yeah. You know, I have a, it's not even my saying, but I've kind of adopted it. It's, if it wasn't for bad luck, I'd have no luck because I
Oh my God.
have like the worst luck. Every, I have to be cursed because I have no luck. Everything that I have, I've had to prepare for and earn. I have, if I won a Ferrari, okay, it would, something would happen to it. I could put it in a garage, covered up with a tarp, give the keys to someone else and say, I don't want to drive it. I just want to own it. I'd say within a year, the garage would collapse or something and damage the car because that's just,
Oh
I
my
wouldn't
God.
even have to touch it. That's me. Be like, hey, hate to inform you, our garage collapsed. Oh, really? Yeah, that's a shame. Yeah, your car was in it. And I'd be like, fuck. And in the back of my mind, be like, yeah, well, that's your life. You don't have any luck. So
Jesus.
I just, that's probably why I don't gift myself things, because they're gonna get fucked up by something, not even me, you know.
You don't buy lottery tickets like ever, no?
No, never. My grandmother gave me $100 to go gamble when I was old enough to go into the casinos in Louisiana. And so we went to go gamble, and she gave me $100. And she said, we're going to be here for a couple hours, make it last. And within 20 minutes, I'm looking for my grandma because I have no money left. And it's like, and she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, you're over here playing the slots. And she goes, what did you go play? I said, I went and played poker. And she goes, you're not very good. I said, oh, I know. And they told me that too, so yeah, I got on like a $5 table, and that was it. I mean, I was out within like a couple of minutes, and it's just like,
Oh my
well,
God.
shoot, I've got $10 left. I got enough to go get me a Coke, go get a soft drink in here. So I sat there for the next 2.5 hours, twiddling my thumbs, watching her pull the slots. And she's just raking it in. She's playing nickel slots. And I came up here with 150 and I left with 400. That's good. I'm like going, man, I wish I had that kind of luck. So no, I don't buy lottery tickets or anything like that at all.
Okay, so
What about
Bob's
you,
definitely
Michael?
cursed. Michael, what about you? Yeah.
Are you
Well,
cursed, Michael?
at least Bob, she made back not only the $100 that you had lost, but then about
Yeah.
another 150 on top of that. So that's some pretty prolific gambling right there.
Yeah.
I suppose if ever there was an endorsement for
Yeah.
gambling, it would be your
She,
grandmother.
she was good at pulling that slot, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that sounded really bad.
Yeah.
Well,
But-
it did, coupled with my reaction, but I wasn't drawing attention to it. You didn't need to say anything.
as soon as it left, see what I mean? I'm cursed. As soon as it left my mouth, I was like, oh shit, she's rolling over in grave right now. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the issue is having me as your co-host, which is a kind of curse in and of itself. So there you go again. But I mean we kind of like touched on luck and making your luck in the first part of the episode. I mean, people know that I would say 2021 and 2022 were the worst years of my life. There were elements of my childhood that weren't great either, but I don't believe in actual curses. I mean, just unfortunately, bad shit happens to people sometimes.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the things that I kind of thought during the most difficult period of my adult life was like life never guaranteed to be fair. Life never guaranteed to be easy. That wasn't part of the deal. So I don't see myself as cursed. I think I'm pretty fortunate that like I've made it through some really immensely tough times. And now, I mean, whilst like 2021 and 2022 were the worst years of my adult life, 2023 was so much better. 2024 is shaping up to be even better. I think that we have peaks and we have troughs, and I'm at a good point at the moment, and I think mindset does help, and I think just putting in the hard work and which obviously that doesn't guarantee success or happiness, but it can contribute towards it. It can
Yeah.
give you a better chance of having it. And really, it's like remembering that you cannot control external factors, you cannot control the behavior of other people, but you can control yourself and your reaction to situations. And that's kind of what I've been doing, and it's been working out okay for me thus far. So yeah, I'm not cursed. I I mean it'd be kind of cool if there was some supernatural curse story that I could tell you, but I've not really had many supernatural experiences at all in my life. So yeah, but I find them fascinating. I find,
Me too. Yeah.
that I just find like the power of belief fascinating too. Like I love kind of ghost stories and supernatural stories, even if they didn't actually happen in a spiritual world. Just the fact that someone believed them, like
Yeah.
it's it's fascinating.
Yeah. Agreed. Absolutely.
But talking about fascinating things, let's talk about your future books and your future projects. I mean, you were saying before that this book that you've got based in the UK that is your most politically charged, you're looking to release that before the general election, so before kind of autumn this year.
I mean, I would love to. It's a bit of a race against time because I haven't quite finished it yet.
It does feel
Um,
like it.
yeah, yeah, and so I'm gonna talk very nicely to the publisher when it's finished and say, look, is this one that we could exacerbate in terms of the release schedule? Don't know if it's going to happen, but I just think it would be quite an apt kind of window for it to come out in. I mean, the other book I mentioned earlier, the one that's set in France with the fairies, that is actually going through that process of editing right now. So we're hoping that will be out by June, something like that, maybe. So that's
Yeah,
pretty
and
exciting.
so, I mean, are you looking to kind of put out a couple of books a year? Is that a schedule that you would be happy with? Like, do you have any aims in terms of the frequency in which you want to put books out?
I think what I want to do is I want to avoid the situation I had after Below, because that kind of came about when I'd been through, at the beginning of the show today, we were talking about the difference of the pandemic and kind of the impact it had on my work life balance. And it meant that I didn't have anything come out for 3 years basically, because Below came out in 2021 August, and Shadow of the Hidden came out last month. So yeah, about 2.5 years. But I was kind of made very aware during, especially the last year, that just not having anything new come out really can sort of cost you a bit of momentum as a writer. Because I think a lot of, um, let's say, like notoriety, is that the right word? Not sure that's the right word. But like sort of being in the public consciousness as a creator, I think is dependent on continuing to create. I think there are certain people that can write a book every 6 years and it will still land and kind of explode and everyone will pay attention. But I am sadly very distant from that level of readership. So I think at my level, where I'm kind of still on the lower rungs of the ladder, I think it's really important to be consistent about getting books out and just giving people new things to read. And I see some of my peers, like, for example, someone like Adam Hulse, another British writer, who is, always getting work out there. Like, every 7-8 months, he's got a new book out. And, without scrimping on quality at all, it's always great stuff as well. I think that really helps you to kind of be part of the collective consciousness within the genre. So not necessarily saying that I want to have a couple of books out a year. That would be nice. And I've got like 4 finished manuscripts, more or less. No, but 3 3 3/4 probably. So that seems quite viable. But certainly, I don't want to have a year without a new release again. I think that is a mistake.
Yeah, I relate to what you're saying, because my, 'cause 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 first two releases in terms of like book
They were
length
very
were
close together, right?
the girl in the video in the April of 2020, and then They're Watching with Bob Pastorella,
Hmm. I've
Halloween
heard of him.
2020. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the intention was always to put a book out every calendar year, kind of
Yeah,
minimum. But then, as I said before,
life happens, right?
the next few years were very tough indeed. So then it wasn't until the Halloween of 2023 that House of Bad Memories came out. But I suppose one thing that probably helped me was, whilst there weren't any writing, there wasn't any kind of books that came out. I mean, I was continuously podcasting, so I was within the writing community. So it wasn't like I disappeared. It's like, well, where's Michael David Wilson? It's like, well, there he is doing a podcast again, as he has been doing for over a decade now.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so, yeah, my intention is to put out, yeah, a book every calendar year minimum. If it happens that there's more, then there's more. But I think a book a year would be great.
And
Two
is that
books
something
a
you
year
think
would
is
probably be
on for this
better.
year? Have you got a
Um,
2024 release scheduled, or?
well, I can tell you that, I mean, the novel Daddy's Boy is ready for literary agents and publishers and editors to look at. So there's a possibility there. And then I am very close to finishing the second draft of What Would Wesley Do, which means that that will be going to beta readers. So, I mean, the intention is to put out a book every calendar year, but if you don't meet what is essentially an arbitrary intention that has no contractual ramifications for not meeting it, then so what?
Yeah,
So
you work
be it.
around it. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
we will see what happens. I mean, the state with Daddy's Boy at the moment is my film manager read it. He loved it. He thought it was very difficult to categorize, and he's like, I absolutely love this. I have no idea how to sell it, which is some strange feedback to get. And then I have implemented a note that he made. Um, and I think I've made it better for it. And now he's looking at it with that implemented, and we're probably going to connect in a couple of weeks. But yeah, based on what he says, we'll determine whether we show it to, like, there's a specific literary agent who might be interested in it. I will find it very funny if Daddy's Boy is the book that gets me a literary agent, because it is I mean, you've both read an
Yeah,
early
yeah.
draft of it, but it is the
It
most
is mad as a box of
ridiculous,
frogs.
over the top,
Yeah,
silly, extended dick joke of a book. And if this is the one that brings me success, then life is funny. If I'm
Mhm.
indeed.
cursed, then that is a glorious, wonderful curse to have.
Take that
But
curse
that is
all
boy
day.
isn't a curse. It is a gift to the world, and very specifically to John
Mhm.
Crinan. So,
It's
enjoy that gift. But yeah, having that and having What Would Wesley Do ready to go. I mean, I'm very happy to be in this state where there are two book length works ready to go. So if
Yeah,
one of them
absolutely.
comes out in 2024, great. But if not, then it looks like it'll be a good 2025 anyway.
For sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I've gone quite a bit since. I mean, they're watching to have anything. And all that's on me. I mean, there's nothing to blame. I got into a slump. Didn't write any prose for a year, but we wrote a screenplay. And so, me and Michael, we spent a year writing a screenplay. So that's a totally different beast. And we're probably going to be rewriting that screenplay, hopefully pretty soon. I worked on another screenplay. I've written a novel since then that I do not like. and I'm working on a new project now. But I do have a book coming out next year. I don't know when,
Awesome.
but I do have a book coming out next year. So,
Can you tell us more about that book, or is it still hush hush?
I mean, it's a vampire novel. I can't really. I'm not gonna. I can't. I'm not. I'm not supposed to say much. I do have a book coming out next year. It is a vampire novel. It is. It is basically Suicide Kings meets Fright Night.
Okie
So,
dokie.
yeah, if you've ever seen Suicide Kings, one of my favorite movies, a lot of people don't like it, but it's and there's a little bit more to it than that, and we're probably going to use it in the marketing. But my publisher, if he heard me talking right now, he'd probably be like, "Shut up." So,
We'll leave that there.
yeah. So yeah, we'll leave it there. I don't know when it comes out. Hopefully, we'll make an announcement soon. I'm really hoping to make an announcement soon.
Very good.
But the way you flipped the tables there, Kev, asking questions, it was as if
Sorry,
you
fellas.
became the interviewer. Which
He
brings us
jazzed us.
to your podcast, All Creatives Now. So tell us a little bit about that podcast, what it is you're doing, and how that came about.
Yeah, so my co-host on All Creatives Now is horror and sci-fi writer called Paul Stevenson, an all-round excellent bloke. And he was talking to me about a year and a half ago now, maybe a bit longer, about maybe doing a podcast interview format. But he kind of pointed to your good self and also Neil at Talking Scared and said, look, these guys have kind of got this interviewing of writers down, basically. Like, there isn't a need for someone to go and interview writers, right, about their books or about whatever specifically. So how would you feel about doing something that was more sort of generally geared towards creatives? And I thought it was a great idea because, like, I have found actually even on This Is Horror previously that I've learned quite a bit when you've spoken to people who have perhaps not just been a writer. Perhaps people talking about like doing visual arts. Or I remember once listening to an episode of Writing Excuses where they were talking to someone who was an audiobook narrator and just like learning about like this kind of skills and techniques involved in that. And I just thought, wow, this is actually really fascinating to kind of hear a different creative and their process and how it might. It's surprising how much there is that you can apply to the writing life as well. So we did a first sort of half season. We spoke to some writers, but we also spoke to some visual artists, a stand-up comedian, musicians. And that's the idea, basically. We just speak to different creative people. We find out what inspires them, what tools they use, what their origin story is. And yeah, we had a little hiatus because Paul had a loss in his family, which was very difficult. So we actually paused for a little while. And then after some time of sort of thinking about whether he wanted to still do creative stuff, he decided he did. So we came back this year and we've done a few episodes. In fact, recently he spoke to Sonora Taylor. And so we'll be putting that up probably tomorrow, actually, as we're recording this. So it'll probably already be out when this comes out. But we've also spoken to a visual artist guy called Paul Holbrook Phillips, who's like from True Spilt Milk Designs, who does like these absolutely mad like pencil drawings, like and stuff like that. It's just been really fascinating, just like talking to different creatives, finding out what their processes are, and also kind of joining the dots between like what they do with it, be it visual arts, comedy, whatever, and how that kind of ties into the creative endeavors that we are trying to sort of perform as well. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I remember with the first season, there was a video show to accompany the audio. Will you be putting these latest episodes up as video as well, or are you just sticking with the audio format?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, we found that we weren't getting many hits on YouTube, and because I am technically a spoon, I cannot do the editing. So that's all down to Paul. So he said, look, in terms of his time, it's much more economical for him to just make it an audio package, especially because we were getting far more downloads on audio than we were on video. It just didn't seem worthwhile. So yeah, for the time being at least, that has been shelved. And I mean, that is good because people will see my face less often, which is always a plus.
Well, I will make no comment upon that particular matter, even if I might make many comments on that matter off air, but this is an on-air production. And
To be
I mean,
professional, yeah,
well,
or something.
I wouldn't go that far. But I mean, you said that Paul was obviously very complimentary about This Is Horror, and Neil McRobert of Talking Scared. And
Yeah.
the thing that I would say that I have said to other people is that if you're thinking about doing a horror fiction show or a writer's interview show, if you want to do it, then I think you should go for it, because I think what makes each show unique is your perspective. So don't think there are already writer shows that I enjoy, therefore I'm not going to do it. No, you should do it, because just in it being you, that is your unique selling point. So be you, be authentically you.
Sure.
If you want to start a podcast, then start a podcast.
Yeah, and we will continue to talk to writers as well. But I think also because Paul also does book cover design, he's quite interested in sort of visual arts as well. And we've both been musicians. Well, I was a screamer, not really a musician, but at different times speaking to musicians kind of sort of feeds something in us as well. So I think this approach has been really enjoyable and really, kind of a breath of fresh air almost from like just seeing something different.
Yeah. I mean, you and I, we have known each other for a long time now.
Very long time.
Getting on for 2 decades, if one
Yeah,
can
it's like 17
conceive.
years or something.
Yeah. And of
There's a
course,
lot
I
of
think,
crimes that we would have a clean record from, like serious crimes, in less time than that.
yeah, which we'll speak no further of.
Mm.
This is getting into
We don't
dark
have that record.
territory.
It's fine. Yeah,
But I mean, one of the things, probably the primary thing that brought us together, was actually heavy metal.
it was, of course. Yeah, heavy metal, absolutely.
And so, I mean, do you ever have a desire to get back into the screaming business? Do you think
I
you
mean,
might be in a band another day? That is the million-dollar question that all the people who probably before this interview didn't even know you were in one before, but we're going there. We're a very niche audience.
I would say actually that the thing I miss most in life that I did in the past that I don't do anymore is gigging. I mean, I think anyone who has had this experience, unless it was like horrendous for them, I think will probably understand what I'm saying. It's just like I think there is nothing really else like just being on stage, playing songs for a crowd. It's just like really fun, even if the crowd is tiny. Sometimes like it doesn't really matter. Just like playing songs in front of a crowd, especially if you really love the music, is just like completely unique thing in life. So part of me is like I would love to do it, but I mean, in terms of time, like it's just not realistic with the life that I have now. So it ain't probably ever going to happen. But the guy who played guitar for my band that I was in years ago, Desolation, Stu Norman, has got a new band which he's made with his brother called Kald, which is like Kald, and they've written like 4 songs which they've got out so far, like kind of like all singles. But he actually wants to take some of my stories to use for like inspiration and maybe have some lyrics and stuff for the first like album for a couple of the songs. So we're going to work together a little bit on that. So that'll be really fun. I might even do some screaming on it. Who knows?
Yeah, I love it when there's kind of heavy metal and horror fiction collaborations come together. I remember seeing like I can't even remember if it was a few months ago or a year ago, because time, particularly post-pandemic,
We're
has
getting old, mate. We're
merged.
getting old.
It could be that as well. I prefer to blame the pandemic. It is, in fact, just a reality of becoming older.
When you're
But
blaming the pandemic in like 2035,
yeah,
I'll probably have to have a word with you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he'll be all like, and then that's because of the pandemic.
And the kids will
Yeah.
be like, "What pandemic? What are you talking about, Granddad?"
Yeah. He
Yeah.
keeps talking about this fucking pandemic.
But anyway, yeah, there was a band that kind of came about inspired by Adam Neville's The
Oh
Reddening. I
yes,
don't know if you saw
fantastic.
that,
Yeah, I
but
saw them. Yeah,
yeah, I listened to a few of their songs. It's like their
decent stuff
metal,
as well. Yeah,
it ain't fucking about. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah, I
absolutely.
love those collaborations, and yeah, I hope that we get to hear you add in some complimentary screams to those
Would be
tracks. So
very
I'm
fun.
gonna have to check the band out. Are they
Yeah.
I
death
do actually have
metal?
a. They are kind of like progressive death metal, I suppose. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So a
All
bit
right.
quite technical,
something.
quite like some
Yeah,
melodic bits, but lots of heavy, crunchy distortion as well. So yeah.
there we go. That reminds me. I don't know if you noticed on X or Twitter, as you like to still call it. There was this. It's not really a meme, but just a post going round being like, name any good albums from the 90s that were not Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, or Nirvana. And it's like, well, we're spoiled for choice here. I
Yeah,
mean,
I was like, I haven't got
Carcass,
time
Part 1,
for all the
At the
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Gates, Slaughter of the Soul, like
yeah, yeah.
just
The
all
Somber Lane by
amazing
Dissection.
kind of,
My God, yeah,
yeah, just so much good death metal. It's like, well, I can name many. It like might be.
I could probably not sleep for 3 days because I'll be giving you that many album titles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Totally,
exactly,
totally.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I mean, to put you on the spot, if you had to name, you know, three amazing heavy metal albums of any subgenre, which would they be?
Bloody hell. I mean, I think I'd have to put Slaughter of the Soul in there just because I still think it is probably one of the few albums that I listen to, and I think like if this came out today, everyone would be like, "Holy shit!" Like
Yeah.
just as much as they were at the time. Do you know what I mean? And that's like 22 years down the line, or 21
Mm.
years down the line, or something. Absolutely mad that it's still that impactful. So I'd definitely put that in there. Another couple. I'd probably go for something more recent. Um, but it's difficult to say. I mean, what have I been listening to recently, even? It's very difficult to say. Um, what about you? Have you got any that come immediately to mind?
I mean, the two that I mentioned, being Slaughter of the Soul, At the Gates, and Heartwork by
Yeah,
Carcass, those
yeah,
are
yeah.
the two that absolutely jump out. Um, It's
I put
not a heavy
maybe one
metal
of
album,
the.
but if I
Yeah, go
wanted
on.
to throw an absolutely wild card of a good album in, I might go for Black Ribbons by Shooter Jennings
I don't
with
know it.
some kind of voiceover by Stephen King. It's just like
Whoa.
nothing I've ever really heard before. Um,
I might go,
I
with
know,
Passage by Samael as well,
yeah,
because it
yeah.
kind of just changed what metal was, and that was 96.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you're not the biggest Tool fan, and by not the biggest, I don't think you're a fan at all, but I would
Not really, no.
consider putting one of the first three Tool albums in. I'd maybe consider putting an early Opeth album in,
Yeah,
but
yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, or Blackwater Park, for example.
yeah,
Another album where I
yeah,
think probably there's nothing I would change about it, even today.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. And, for then a different flavor of metal, I mean, there's a lot of kind of Slayer and Megadeth that I think did a hell
Yeah,
of a lot for thrash metal.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, for
Mm-hmm.
sure,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say Megadeth, Peace Sells, like every song is the whole album is just
Yeah,
incredible.
you can't skip it,
Um,
basically. Yeah,
no, you can't. And it's like the album that, Gar Samuelson and Chris Poland taught Dave Mustaine about jazz. And you can hear it in there. Um, an album that doesn't seem to get a whole lot of recognition is Sabotage. The Dungeons Are Calling. This is like, I'm aging myself here, but it's an EP. Every song is just fucking awesome. And it is so 80s that when you hear it, you're gonna want to put a headband on. I mean, you're gonna be like, oh man, this is total 80s metal.
It could be mourning for my hair.
Yeah. And
you got the most hair out of the lot of us.
Yeah, no lie.
Still pretty dense.
Yeah. But then, I mean, all the albums, I never really got into too much like death metal. Cause I always tend to like, some of the older bands, like, I know, and Micah will appreciate this one, but, Sanctuary, loved Sanctuary. When I first heard, their version of White Rabbit, I was like, this is incredible. And then they go right, the rest of the album, Battle Angels and all that. That first album is so fucking good. And then, I was a big fan of Nuclear Assault too.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah. Nuclear Assault, Critical Mass, like the John Conley Theory when he did his solo album. It's really like, I think it's out of print, but I have it. Yeah. It's just some good. It's just jam. It's like total jam.
Well, we've given people a hell of a lot of heavy metal recommendations.
Whether they want them or not.
So, yeah, exactly. Even though not everyone who listens to This Is Horror podcast is into heavy metal, but we gave you them free of charge.
Yeah,
but
enjoy or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or not.
But how about to kind of round things off? Could you recommend some books to people? Let's say a classic, a recent release of the last 5 years, and then something that is not horror.
Bloody hell. Okay, something of the last 5 years. I'm going to go with this is going to sound really repetitive because I recommended this the other day on Twitter. And it is David Peake's Corpse Paint. I still think this is one of the most underrated horror novels ever written. Like, it just blows my mind that it doesn't have like a million reviews, because like I read it and it just blew my mind from like chapter 1 to the end. It is very heavy metal related. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say you continued the theme.
Sorry about that. But I absolutely love it. It's amazing. Something that is not horror. I mean, I just finished reading today on the flight All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. And this was actually my first time reading his work. I've got his last 2 novels on Kindle, but I just haven't got around to them. And this one just popped up in my reading list a few weeks ago, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to read this. And absolutely bloody loved it. Definitely treads the very edges of horror, as much as it is a crime book. You can see little nods to his horror experiences throughout. But yeah, it's very much a crime novel. And a classic. Classics are so difficult, aren't they? Because it's been such a long time. I suppose I'd have to go with the one that got me sucked into horror in the first place, which was The Rats by James Herbert. Probably just go with that, because it was just the one that, yeah, I read it and then nothing was ever the same again for me.
Yeah. I mean, I feel, being from the UK, like there was a certain time where James Herbert was as synonymous with horror as Stephen King.
Absolutely.
But
yeah.
like, I don't think like he's as known in America. Like, he doesn't seem to be mentioned as much.
Maybe a little bit more niche. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we won't talk about his treatment of women in his books, because, I mean, Jesus Christ, just no. James, no. But anyway.
Okay. I mean, it's difficult to know how to respond to we won't talk about. Okay. Then we won't. That's that then, isn't it?
Good. Yeah. Excellent.
Well, in terms of something people can do, they could connect with you. But where can they connect with you?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Blue Sky Social. If you just search for Kev Harrison and look for my face, you will soon find me quite easily. I'm on all of those. You can also go to my website, which is kevharrisonfiction.com, and there you can actually download for free a novelette called Warding if you sign up for my newsletter, where you'll get monthly recommendations of books and albums and films and TV series, and just some writing about what I'm doing, basically. So, yeah, I'd love to have more people reach out always.
All right. Do you have any final thoughts to leave our listeners with?
No, just to try and be kinder to each other. Try to see the similarities rather than the differences with other people as much as you can, because I think there's too much othering, too much demonizing of the other these days, and it really gets me down, as we talked about in the first part.
All right. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you so much for having me on, guys. It's been a bloody pleasure to chat to you.